Hey there, and welcome to Red Hat Enterprise Linux Presents. I'm sorry I blew my intro. It's been a crazy busy week around here. If you haven't noticed, we've got Red Hat Enterprise Linux 9.2 came out last week. 8.8 is live as of today. We've got an internal conference, hangout, get together, call it for that we call RHEL Week. So there's, hold on, some folks are saying there's no sound. Okay. So whoever's reporting that, maybe double check your connection because I'm getting confirmation that sounds good. Okay. So let's start that over. Good morning, good afternoon, good evening, wherever you may be hailing from. This is Red Hat Enterprise Linux Presents, episode number 57. I'm your host, Eric the IT Guy Hendricks. And before anything else has a chance to break, let me bring in my co-host, Mr. Brian Smith himself.
Hey Eric, how's it going?
Oh, well, we got off to a rough start, but I think we'll get there.
Sounds
But
good. Yeah.
as I was saying, we've got an internal event going on this week called RHEL Week. So it is a company-wide event to celebrate Red Hat Enterprise Linux across Red Hat. So it's kind of exciting to talk to folks all across the company, all across the globe. We've been trying to share pictures out on our Twitter handle. But it's cool to see some of the offices come together. It's a lot of fun to answer questions from folks in different parts of the businesses, like whether it's next door in OpenShift or way down the road in like finance or something. People ask questions about what is RHEL? What are we doing with RHEL? And it's just a full week to celebrate, and it's extra special celebration this year because RHEL is of drinking age in the United States. So
Happy birthday.
But so it only took us 57 episodes and over 2 years of making content on this particular show before we finally managed it. But Brian and I managed to corner our guest today and drag him kicking and screaming onto the show. But with that said, I want to introduce today Mike McGrath, and he is our VP of Engineering. And actually, Mike, why don't you tell us your title? Welcome to the show.
Hello. My name is Mike McGrath, and my title is officially the Vice President of Core Platforms Engineering at Red Hat.
So did you get to pick that title? Because if I got to pick my own title, it'd be much, much different.
I did not get to pick that title, and if they let me pick my title, it would almost certainly have a fun acronym involved somehow.
So Mike, can you tell us, what exactly does the Vice President of Core Technologies at Red Hat do?
Well, a lot of meetings, sometimes like this, sometimes not. As a manager, this is for those of you thinking about getting into management, you have to get really comfortable with getting your work done through other people. So I have long since lost access to Git repos and other stuff. But for me, a lot of it is taking some of the higher level strategy that we, things that we're trying to accomplish with our customers, things that Red Hat is trying to accomplish more globally, and making sure that my team is aware of that, marching towards those goals, and has at least as best as I can what they need to succeed.
Very cool.
So tell us a little bit about your journey. How did you come to be the head of engineering?
Yeah, I actually think my story is very interesting. I enjoy talking about it too. So I originally started as a volunteer in the Fedora project, and so at the time I worked at a company called Orbitz.com. This is a travel company, and I was a Red Hat user there. So I was by the time I left, I was the provisioning team lead or something like that for their thousands of servers. And they hired me on full time. And the reason they hired me on full time is because it was around the Fedora Core 3 timeframe. This was back before Red Hat had sufficiently separated its community cage from the internal cage. And so this happened to be, we happened to release on a day that the quarterly numbers were due to finance. And so the CFO, after this, there was we got slash dotted. It was a whole debacle. I was still volunteer, and I got wind of this, but basically the CFO said, let's make sure this never happens again. Okay, let's see what we can do. And at the time, Max Spivak was the Fedora project leader. And he said, "Well, hey, you want to get Mike on the phone because I know he's leading our Fedora infrastructure team right now." And so they were, sure, let's go talk to Mike. Infrastructure is important. And the CFO's assistant could not find me. And so apparently that was when Max, he's a volunteer. And so like, well, you want to invite a volunteer to a meeting with our CFO to discuss how we pull the quarterly reports out. And I didn't get to go to that meeting, but the outcome of that meeting, I guess, was that they would hire somebody full-time to work on Fedora infrastructure. And so they hired me on. And back then, Fedora was technically in the marketing team. It was not part of engineering for reasons I won't get into.
That sounds like one of those, we only have an hour here together to.
Yes, that's right. And so, so I that was when I started working in engineering, and I did that for a while. I loved working at Fedora. That was probably one of the best jobs I'll ever have. And from there, I went on to, I got to found OpenShift as well, which we can talk about later if you want. Did that for a few years, and then I switched back over to the platform team. And so from there, I was working on projects like the Project Atomic, if you guys remember that. And that kind of evolved into, after the CoreOS acquisition, to CoreOS. And over time, I just, kind of went into management and kind of rose up through the ranks. And now I led all of RHEL and now Core Platforms, which includes RHEL and CentOS and some of that stuff, but also our new in-vehicle work that we're doing and OpenStack, satellite, stuff like that.
So a lot of time spent with Fedora, a lot of time spent with RHEL, and then you kind of slid it in there, but I'm going to call it out. You were part of the founding team for OpenShift. How did that work?
Yeah, that was actually very funny. At the time, our CTO was Brian Stevens, and he'd been trying to find a way to kind of showcase Red Hat products. This was at a time when services were kind of taking off. There were a lot of people that had a free tier, and Heroku at the time was pretty popular. And so he brought me on and as kind of employee number one on something called Project Libra. And then a week later, he brought on employee number two, who was a kind, smart young man named Matt Hicks. And he was a senior manager at the time. And so Matt and I kind of worked together. There was an acquisition that happened in there in Makara. And then we also had, we had OpenShift Flex and Express back then. But yeah, I mean, the original the thing that became OpenShift started as just some very basic PHP and Bash scripts for me. Commit number one was over our company break. It was like December 28th, and I was just bored, and so I started working on it. And the intention was to fold it into some other projects back then. But it kind of became its own thing and took off. And I served as the chief architect for V1 and V2, and I was also the operations manager. And then they, now they're on V3 and V4, and it's a huge product. And I learned a lot during that time. And that was also when I first became a manager, was in OpenShift time span. So it's been fun to work on that, but also kind of, in a way, set it free and let it do its thing. And I get to watch it from afar and back on Linux, which is where I'm very comfortable, and I enjoy working on the operating system side of things.
So Mike, one thing I'm curious about is how does the RHEL engineering work with or impact what we're doing with OpenShift? Like how does that all work?
Yeah, it works in a couple different ways. Number one, I always say it this way. This is the easiest way for me to kind of conceptualize it. But you got to remember, OpenShift is mostly just a RHEL sandwich. It installs on top of RHEL, and then the containers that run on top of OpenShift are also RHEL based. And so it's like the bacon of a BLT. That bacon plays a really important role in that. But also without it, you're quite a bit is missing. And so OpenShift in a lot of ways kind of behaves like a very needy customer, in that they've got a lot of very specific things that they want to do, and they can't do those things without us. And so I try to maintain a really good relationship with all of our engineers and the leaders that they have on the OpenShift side. It helps that I have some background in it. They don't often have to explain to me why they need something. Usually I can just kind of understand it. The other thing too is, especially on the container technology side, OpenShift and Kubernetes have always pushed those areas to their limits. And so those technologies, like a Podman, for example, perfectly fine to use alone. If I'm just on workstation, I'm going to build something or something with Podman Desktop, plenty of great use cases there without OpenShift. But if you want to do some serious computing across, hundreds or thousands of systems, then you're going to push those doing something once is very different than doing it 1,000 times. And so, the use cases, the way we test it, stuff like that, we try to take special care of OpenShift in those regards.
Very cool. One thing we get a lot of questions about is like how does RHEL development work as far as we have Fedora, we have CentOS Stream as upstreams, we have we obviously have RHEL as the product. How does all this, how does that flow from an engineering perspective?
Yeah, it's a good question because in the industry, the timelines that RHEL is talking about are just very different from the timelines of most software companies. We are currently making decisions. For example, RHEL 9 is out. We're working on RHEL 10 already, and we're now making decisions that we, or at least somebody, will be living with through 2035, 36, maybe 37. And so just the concept of that we can make these, what we do now will impact, people. It's pretty impactful. And so obviously we try to maintain good relationships with upstream. That is where all of this starts. We are nothing without our upstreams, and we have many thriving communities. Certainly we have many people working in leadership positions in the kernel, for example. It all starts there, but all those thousands and tens of thousands of communities, they don't actually coordinate with each other very well. And so for us, a lot of that comes together for the first time in Fedora. That's the first time we put everything together, make sure it works. And where it doesn't work, we work with the upstreams to make it work. That's very important to us. We have a very strict upstream first policy. And that includes, all of this is open source. And we try to we always remind ourselves that a thriving community is different than just being upstream on something, or having something open source. Those are different things. And so once it comes together in Fedora, we look and see if there's any major operating system innovation that needs to happen there, potentially disruptive innovation. And so, a good example of that would be systemd, for example. That's not something that we could just go and do and release as a feature in like 9.2 or some minor release. It takes more coordination than that. And so we get things ready, and then roughly every 3 years, we figure out which version of Fedora best suits RHEL. We don't have to. We could pick another distro to base off of if we wanted to, but Fedora has been a fantastic upstream for us, and in community project that we're heavily invested in. So we pick it, we pull it internally and rebuild it. Now that the initial build is where CentOS Stream comes in. CentOS Stream caused a lot of confusion when it first came out. And to me, the easiest way to think about CentOS Stream is we used to do RHEL development internally and nobody ever saw it. And now they get to see it. And so it's, we've always had, whenever, 9.2 came out last week, well, we were already working on 9.3. And before CentOS Stream, nobody ever would have seen any of that work. And now they do. We just do it in the open, and things get released there. People call it a test bed or a beta. Like, those are all loaded terms. Another way to think about CentOS Stream and RHEL is that RHEL is now just a batch release of CentOS Stream. So CentOS Stream is constantly releasing in a fairly unpredictable manner. The RHEL minor releases pick those at a point in time and do a release, kind of like Fedora, but CentOS Stream is much, much, much closer to the RHEL development cycle than Fedora is. And Fedora is a great place where innovation happens, but CentOS Stream is where we do more of the integration work or bug fixes and features and things like that. And then, of course, there's RHEL, which is where we put all of our effort in terms of certifications and lots and lots and lots of testing. And that is where we, that is the money-making part of this operation is in RHEL. And that is where we, spend a lot of our time. All of that stuff is leading up just to make sure that RHEL is the best operating system that it can possibly be.
And I think having you at the kind of in the command chair of that is a great testament to Red Hat's strategy. You started out working on Fedora, you spent some time working on OpenShift, and I think that's very much a mirror of how Red Hat sees RHEL's place in the industry at large, or not just the industry, but in the technology space at large. Is we really have a huge focus on things like Fedora and CentOS Stream, and of course bringing in all of our partners and other hyperscalers and whatnot into CentOS Stream has really bolstered the effectiveness of RHEL on multiple different platforms through things like CentOS Stream, SIGs, the special interest groups, and then it all filters in because the cliche that we hear a lot is that rising tides raise all ships, and that's definitely true in RHEL. And so a lot of our engineers work both on Fedora or CentOS Stream and RHEL. But what kind of an engineering force do we have dedicated to RHEL?
It's a good question. I'd say definitely the vast majority. I don't want to give a specific number, but the vast majority, their first and foremost job is RHEL. Now, if they're going to put a feature through or do a bug fix, because of the way CentOS Stream and Fedora work, they often land there first. But that is because of a lot of that's because of our upstream first policies and things. So they push those things up there. But there's also a side benefit of all of that, which is a lot of that stuff gets tested many, many times before we even release it in RHEL, even if that's a bug fix. And so we do have a few people dedicated. We've got maybe a few people dedicated to CentOS Stream, maybe a few more people dedicated to the Fedora side of it. But yeah, the vast majority are here in service of RHEL and our customers, and they just happen to be very open and transparent. And so we do a lot of our work in Fedora and CentOS Stream as well.
So Mike, you've mentioned our upstream first policy a couple of times. Can you just elaborate a little bit more, like what that means from an engineering perspective?
Yeah. So the first and foremost is important to remember that for the code that we ship and support, all open source. That is a hard stop, and that's not just that's not something that engineering believes in. That is built into the very fabric of Red Hat. And so and there has been times in the past where we've looked at other licenses for things. Sometimes an open source license, we think doesn't necessarily make sense. I actually ran into that in the early days of OpenShift and the SE Linux policies we were thinking about using. Just as an example, in the very early days of OpenShift, the SE Linux policy was very difficult to work with. It was very ingrained, very complicated. And there's an easier one that we could have used in the community, and then save the more advanced, or I should save the very high security one for the enterprise version. And the legal team said, no, we don't actually have a license that could support this. Pick an open one. And so that, for us, open source first. In terms of upstream, this is both, I think, good practice, but it is also beneficial to us is to make sure that the code that we ship is upstream. It makes us a good community member, but it also makes sure that we can actually support the code that we need to in terms of like I said, this 13-year difference. If there's any bit of code that we are the sole maintainers of, it makes things harder for us, and it makes things harder for the community as well. And so we work really hard to make sure that we have people in those communities that can actually have commit access and make sure they're thriving and healthy. But it's not altruistic. We're not a charity. There's very good reasons we do that. And it's proven to, as a model, it's proven to work out very well.
So shifting gears a little bit, I mentioned at the top of the show that we had a couple of minor blips in our radar. Of course, being facetious, RHEL 9.2 came out last week, and RHEL 8.8 is GA as of today. So all the bits are available for both of those versions. So what are some of the current projects going on? Whether you want to address that as what we've just wrapped up, or if you want to talk about what's currently going on, like today forward.
Yeah, I think there's a couple of big trends that if you've ever heard our GM Gunnar talk about, or any recent presentation, certainly we'll be talking a lot about this at this coming summit, and certainly the last several summits, is this shift towards adding features via services. And so, certainly the operating system is is not new to this. We've always relied on things like external DNS or NTP. That's what they are. They're just services, and we go and rely on them and use them. In our case, things like insights have become very important, and also just general ease of use. So I've been very excited to see what we've been doing with the web console. That is,
Brian put you up to that, didn't he?
He didn't. I know he did. Do you like the web console, Brian?
Yeah, well, yeah. I'm the product manager for web console, so yeah, I'm talking about it constantly. So that's why Eric's mentioning that. So
so I'm a command line guy. I'm a homeroom guy. Keep my hands on homeroom. But I've actually, it's the web console. If nobody has seen it, it really is legitimately the first web interface console to Linux that has been fully useful end to end. It never has felt clunky or weird, and even the terminal in the web console works very well. I know for 9.2 we've recently added the dark mode for web console. Hey, love it.
Best feature ever.
Best feature we've ever had. You can't beat it. I think that's great, and it solves a real problem. We do have situations where we have customers, for example, that aren't in major metropolitan areas, and finding talent can be a real challenge for them. We have absolutely had feedback that we would love to have more RHEL, or just use more RHEL in general, but we're having a hard time hiring expertise for that. And the web console is a fantastic way for Windows admins who are obviously skilled and talented, but just haven't had experience with Linux, to come and get that experience very quickly. And it solves a lot of problems for them. And so I think that's a big one that I always talk about. I think anytime I have a chance to demo the web console, I do, because it also demos very well. I know that we've added some more interfaces for like cryptographic functions. I think was crypto policies.
Yeah. We just posted a link to a blog I wrote that was published last week with all the all the what's new in the web console in 8.8, 9.2, lots and lots of great stuff in there. And then we also had a question in the chat about, is web console the same as cockpit? So this is a good example of our upstream, our upstream first policy. So cockpit is the upstream project, and then we brand it as the RHEL web console in RHEL. But there, you'll see those terms kind of used interchangeably to answer the question that we had in the chat.
Yeah, and we internally we're very distinct about the difference between a project and a product. And there are things, for example, that happen in a project, or things that happen in a product, for example, certifications that never happen in a project. And so, these are just some of those common areas that we look at. So I loved all the stuff we had there. I think another big one is system roles. So this is like a collection of Ansible roles for those of you that haven't looked at it. And it's kind
of come on. Brian had to have put you up to this.
No, yeah, that's my other focus area is system roles. So
well, hey, these are just things that are coming to my mind, Brian. That's just how it's going.
It works for me. Keep going.
Yeah, so system roles is a great way to kind of future-proof your configs. We make it easier for you. I know we added Podman. I don't. Was Podman new in 9.2, or did we add that last time?
Yeah. So we had four new system roles. The Podman was one of them. So you can basically using automation deploy Podman containers at scale. Another new system role we had is the RHC system role. So this is all about getting your systems registered and connected to Red Hat, through things like subscription management, but also connecting to insights, stuff like that. So that's out there. We had a journal D system role, so you can automate, getting a persistent journal configured and all the settings around how large you'd like the system journal to be, rotation, stuff like that. And then finally, we had an Active Directory integration system role. So if you want to automate, getting your RHEL systems integrated into a Microsoft Active Directory environment, you can now do that at scale as well. So lots of great stuff with system roles in this release.
Good. Yeah, I spun Brian up and he went. It's good. And also, I mentioned insights earlier too. We're always adding new things for insights. My team doesn't work directly on like the insights technology, like the insights service, but we do a lot of work in trying to make sure that different insights rules and things are available. And so this is, if you haven't looked at insights, it's another one of those things where your system checks in and you can learn all kinds of stuff about it, which we constantly get feedback of how useful it is. And we're spending a lot of time there. You're going to see more and more work on things like insights. And I think the other one too is image builder. Image builder is basically a way to go build images, and we're constantly investing more time and effort in making sure that that image builder is everything that it can be. And also I should also mention for all of you that are out there, these are all things that we're actively working on and actively developing. And so if you have specific features that you want, like, you should reach out to us either via support case, or reach out to Eric or Brian or me, and let us know, because we would certainly rather build something that you want immediately, as opposed to guessing and then just getting it right down the road. So,
all right.
Yeah,
Well,
for
you
sure.
mentioned image builder, which is one of my focus areas. So I'll let the other one slide.
there you go.
Yeah, I was just going to say too, we had, as an example of some of the stuff we do with insights, we had John Spinks on, it was either the last episode or a couple episodes ago, to talk about the insights malware detection service, which is really cool. So if anyone wants more information on that, check out our previous show on that. That's a really, really useful functionality.
Mm-hmm.
And we'll also link to the last episode where Nate and Brian took a look at the web console and what's new in RHEL 9.2. So in case you haven't, I'll put in the obligatory message that if you haven't subscribed to our channel, please do so. We produce content like this every week. RHEL Presents is every other week, where we usually have interviews, usually some demos. I think Mike said he was going to show us how to compile your own kernel, right?
I'll get right on it.
All right. So he said he was too managery to do a demo, but definitely like this content, share it with a friend, and subscribe to the channel. So we're kind of talking about what's going on. Is there and you've mentioned Red Hat Summit, which, if you are attending virtually, you can go and see. We've got a number of keynotes and whatnot that will be streamed live. I'm pretty sure it'll be on the Red Hat YouTube channel, so kind of the sister channel to this one. And then there are, I forget how many, but there's a number of sessions that will be available virtually, so on demand. And then most of the live sessions, some to most, somewhere in that ballpark, there will be recorded sessions not live from Summit, but on site at Summit. My brain failed there for a second, but so that's coming up next week. So anything you want to tease? Any sessions from Summit next week you want to share with the audience?
Well, I'll be doing with Siddharth and Scott. We're going to be doing our RHEL roadmap session. So if you want to see directionally where we're headed, but without us using very highly committal words, you're welcome to come and see what's coming down for us. And we'll cover more about what's been going on in RHEL now. Also, I know Gunnar has one. I forget what it's called, but it's always like a nice State of the Union and kind of state of the industry. That is one that I never miss. And if it's recorded, I think that's a great way to see maybe not what features that we're looking at, but more of the high level direction that, basically what is Red Hat's opinion of the industry and what operating systems should be. That's another great one. And then also just the general keynotes. I love the keynotes. Every year they're great. And they're also, I think they're typically streamed. I usually they're free to stream. I'm assuming that's still the case. Do you guys know? Okay.
Yeah, I found out this morning for sure.
Good. So yeah, if even if you're not going to be at Red Hat Summit, feel free to join those and just see what Red Hat is up to. I learn something at those keynotes every year. I think they're always fantastic.
It's always fun when you reach out to one of your colleagues on chat and go, well, I guess we're supporting that now.
That's That's a thing. It's also funny. The other thing too is we work on some of this stuff for so long. They have an internal code name, and it's always like I never really know what we're going to call things until they get announced, and so it's fun to see what they came up with.
So definitely catch Summit next week. We'll have a link in the show notes. So what can you tease out for us? What's coming either for Mike McGrath? Let's start there. What's the future of Mike McGrath look like, and then we'll get into a bit about RHEL.
Well, I think the big things on my mind right now, ARM is a really top topic. We're constantly talking about ARM, how to enable it, and what the use cases are. We're also spending a lot of time on Edge. So we have a RHEL for Edge product now that is out there and being sold, and we've talked about we've announced that we've got an in-vehicle offering that we're working on as well. And this is exactly what I'm describing. You'll be able to purchase a car someday in the future that has our Linux in it, and I think those are both examples of where we're going to be taking some of our traditional expertise in the data center and pushing it into new and interesting use cases. And so I don't think ARM wasn't a particular surprise to us. We knew that there would be new architectures and things coming out there, but that Red Hat has decided to enter into the in-vehicle market, I think has been such an interesting project to work on, and has such great synergies with, I hate the word synergies, such great alignment with what we're already doing. And I think for us, those are kind of the big things that we're looking at. It's basically just taking RHEL and finding new ways to apply it in new and interesting use cases. So for me, the immediate future, that's what those are things both taking up a lot of headspace with me right now. Oh, and I guess I should also mention AI, which is it's the hot topic of the day. But IBM Think happened last week, and Arvind said something like, I think it was Arvind. Somebody said something like, we originally expected this to take 10 years, and now we're thinking it's closer to 3 or something like that. And so we've ChatGPT, I think, has been very interesting. I've dabbled with it. I'm far from an AI expert. But I am determined to make sure that me and some of the engineering teams, that we develop this as kind of a core competency of ours, because it's clearly disruptive. And we've even had some people, for example, we've had some people use it to do code reviews on the Linux kernel. Not that they, it's not like they're just pumping it right through and committing code and all that stuff. But they've been using it for, suggestions and just to kind of see where it is. And that's something that a lot of communities have been talking about, is what should this stuff be licensed under if AI wrote it. And that has all been a fascinating thing to see.
So is it safe to say that that Red Hat is looking at bringing the DeLorean back? Because I couldn't help but notice.
Yeah, this is U.S. patent 283882. The funny thing about this is that this was granted on May 20th, 1986, which is after when the movie came out. So I guess they were still working on the patent approval before the DeLorean had been shipped and finally approved. But no, this is just a reminder that we're trying to get to, the in-vehicle is kind of the new thing. So I've got a little reminder back there. And if normally this is my countdown clock, but I turn it off for public things like this. So you guys are just gonna have to keep guessing on when it might be launched. But we're working on it. It's very exciting.
So that's what's taking up Mike's headspace. What about RHEL in general? What's coming down the pipe?
I think RHEL in general has been thinking through, how do we take some of our traditional experiences and either make them a service, make them available as a service, or deprecate them for the new thing. Because all three are needed throughout, as we modernize the operating system. There are times where, for example, Image Builder is a good example of something in the middle of that. Image Builder is something that you could run yourself on your system, or behind your disconnected firewall, your air-gapped firewall, and it'll work just fine there. Or it could be that you don't feel like dealing with that. You just want us to build it. You come to our site and you go through and you build it, and that's fine. There are some things that we know need to be just on premise. There's things that you wouldn't manage, or things you wouldn't look to Red Hat to manage for you. And then there are things that are currently built into the operating system that maybe you would just, that, you know, should just be a first-class service of some kind. Things like that we've already done. I mentioned NTP. NTP can be a really difficult thing for you to set up on your own. And so there have been several of them set up for you. And I think Red Hat, I know this, Red Hat runs one. I'm assuming it's the default. I have actually seen it and laid my hands on it. It exists. And so what are some other things like that that could make our users' lives easier? And the answer is the answer is to just do it for them. Like it doesn't get much easier than doing something for them. And that's where these services come into play. But interestingly, you can do things as a service that you couldn't do on premise, you know, on an actual system. And on premise is right. It could be in the cloud too, just on your own system, I guess is what I mean. And so I think you're going to see a lot of new features. You know, we're still investing heavily in insights. Everybody should take a look at insights and just make that kind of a normal course of enabling. But also, as we look at how do you manage RHEL systems, it's been true for a very long time. People don't actually log into a RHEL system very often anymore. RHEL systems are managed by Ansible or Satellite, or, you know, name your internal tool, whatever it is. In the case of OpenShift, it's CoreOS, but OpenShift is usually doing the management of the underlying operating system. And that requires a different approach. If you've got some application that prompts you to click yes or no to continue, Ansible's not going to like that. OpenShift's not going to like, the tools you use are not going to like that. And so you know, we need to we've been working on a multi-year journey to make sure that Linux it goes back to its roots and is as programmable as possible. And that it is, you know, giving proper errors when it needs to give an error, that it is quickly taking in input and responding. And all of that just sets up for some very interesting services work that we can do. And I think things like Insights and Image Builder are just the tip of the iceberg of where we're headed there.
So we did have a question come through, and this may not be something you can or feel qualified to address, but I wanted to surface it and give you a chance. But John in the audience asks about hearing some file system talk. It baffles me that Red Hat continues to push Stratus for some future version and ignore that ButterFS is fairly enterprise ready today to me. Any thoughts?
Yeah, we choose what RHEL is going to be. It is definitely not our aim that RHEL should be the entire Linux ecosystem and universe. And the fact is, most of the things that you can do in ButterFS, I should say, is most of the things that our customers want us to do can be done in other ways without ButterFS. And so on the one hand, yeah, we could go hire a bunch of ButterFS experts and train them up. But our customers aren't actually asking for that. And certainly if we had major customers coming in and asking for it, that we would take a closer look at it. But B, yeah, sure. ButterFS is a great, a fine file system. And it is I forget if it's I think it's the default in Fedora even.
Yep.
But it is not one that we've chosen to take. And it's not that we're anti-ButterFS. It's just that, you know, we've got, you know, the team size is what it is, and we've got to pick and choose what's in and what's out. And unless customers show up and say, hey, we need this for this reason, and here's how much we're willing to pay for it, I don't expect that we'll pull ButterFS into the roadmap until that kind of thing happens. So
it's a fair answer. That's kind of all the questions from chat. Brian, do you have anything you want to surface?
I did see one on Xorg. I thought there was an Xorg question.
Let's
there
bring
was. Yeah. And Brian Stinson is out in the audience, and he gave a pretty good answer too. But Funkytron asked, "What's the future of Xorg, X11, and Fedora? I heard about RHEL future and the way for Wayland and deprecation of X11. But what is the Red Hat specific Fedora as well? I ask as a X11 Xorg NVIDIA user."
Yeah, so I just full transparency, I am also an Xorg user fairly often because I use Synergy for my mouse and keyboard sharing, and Wayland has traditionally had a hard time supporting that. So I think directionally, Wayland is the future for us. We haven't gotten rid of Xorg necessarily, and but I did, like I said, I think we did put the deprecation announcement at some point in there that it is going away. This kind of goes back to the conversation about Btrfs too. We try to be prescriptive about what we support, and right now we've got both. I think we're in a transition period, and certainly it could be the case that there's certainly a future where Wayland doesn't work out and we keep Xorg. That's not that's something that could happen. But directionally, right now, we're putting our efforts towards making Wayland the best that it can be. We kind of inherit Xorg as it is. It's supported for now, but we would like to remove it in a future version once it is sufficiently parity with what Xorg can do and has the ecosystem behind it. Like I said, you get stuff like Synergy for those users. It either works or it doesn't, and we got to make sure, as with everything Red Hat does, the ecosystem is very important.
Yeah, and I think this question was specifically about Fedora as well. So I mean, one thing we should probably make clear is just because RHEL deprecates Xorg, it doesn't necessarily mean that Fedora is going to take that direction. Is that correct, Mike?
Yeah, I think that's right. And certainly, I don't mandate things in Fedora. I guess in Red Hat, we try really hard not to. And I guess if we did, Btrfs wouldn't be in there. But for Xorg, I'm not aware of any reason why we would need to remove it. It is certainly possible that Red Hatters will move on from supporting it. And if there are no other community members willing to take up that charge, that we'd have to remove it because we don't want to ship unmaintained code. But as long as there are maintainers there to support it, and the community wants to keep it there, I have to imagine it'll be available as an option. But I guess let's be careful. I don't want the Fedora one of the Fedora committees to come back and say, Fesco to come back and say, no, we need to get rid of it. Mike was lying. They're allowed to make those decisions.
So we'll get Mike and Matthew Miller on here, and we'll have them duke it out like a late night news talk show or something.
That's right.
But Bob Davis, who's our product manager for RHEL for Workstation, pointed out that Xorg was deprecated in RHEL 9, which means that it'll be around for at least, RHEL 9's a year old now, so at least for the next 9 years, because we've got a 10-year life cycle.
2032.
Yep, at least until 2032, and that doesn't. So the difference between the two, deprecated versus removed. Deprecated means we have plans to move off of this at some point. That doesn't mean we're going to do it today. And even let's see, our next window would be RHEL 10. So even if we moved quick enough to remove Xorg out of RHEL 10, that still means that RHEL 8 will still be in maintenance. RHEL 9 will be in maintenance. So you have still 9 years or so of life left in Xorg just in RHEL, and like we pointed out, that's different for the Fedora community. The Fedora community could deprecate it in 2032 when RHEL's done with it, or it depends. And I think this Xorg issue really speaks to a lot of the FUD you hear out there about how RHEL dictates Fedora. It's absolutely not true. There's areas where we are very, very much aligned because both the Fedora community and the RHEL engineering teams really think that this is the future of technology, things like Podman. And then there's areas where we agree to disagree, like Btrfs, like Xorg. So there's a lot of give and take with that relationship, and it really makes for a better product. And that's for a RHEL technical marketer like myself, streaming to you live from a Fedora Linux 38 desktop. So it's a really exciting place to be in. And and I talk with Matthew Miller about these kinds of things on a regular basis. We're going to have him on this show. I'm helping the Fedora community relaunch their podcast, so we've got that going on. So there's a lot of talk back and forth, and it's really exciting to sit kind of where I sit and talk to everybody and get everybody's opinion. It's a lot of fun. But I digress.
But yeah, no, I think that's a really good point, Eric, is explaining exactly what deprecation means. Is I think there are a lot of misunderstandings when we say something's deprecated. So thanks for clarifying that, Eric. That was helpful.
Let's see. Actually, fair question. Mike, what did you said you got Synergy running, and you mentioned Xorg, so you've got some Linux and something else. What's your daily driver looking like?
Yeah, so I did the Red Hat Summit keynote last year, and for that I used RHEL 9. That was when we unveiled RHEL 9, and so I got to launch it there, and that was great. But generally, and since then I've rebuilt it. Generally, my laptop is CentOS Stream, and my desktop is the latest version of Fedora. Although I have not upgraded the latest version of Fedora yet, so I'm still a bit behind. But
It was super smooth. It was real easy transition.
I
Loved it.
use, I do use, so just, full disclosure on all this, I do use the binary NVIDIA drivers. And so that's always a little bit of an adventure for me during the upgrade process. And then I also I use a paid version of Synergy. I put my money where my mouth is, and try to pitch some dollars over there when I can. But yeah, it's helpful between my desktop and my laptop, and I've got a second monitor over here. Works out just fine.
All right. Got some good conversations going on about Fedora and Fedora ambassadors. So quick tease, we will have Matthew Miller, the Fedora project lead, on the show in the middle of July or so. We try and sync up with him every so often to see what the Fedora project's doing.
Here's a good topic for Matthew on that call.
Please.
So Matthew and I talk about stuff. Matthew, for those that don't know, Matthew is in my org. And one of the things that's very, very important to me about Fedora, and I think part of this is just because of my background as a Fedora contributor back in the day, but also part of this, I think, is smart on Red Hat's part. Fedora is such a great way to prove when Red Hat screws up. And I mean that in like the most positive sense. Like they have, because of our setup there, because we've given them quite a bit of, or not given, because they have quite a bit of freedom to move and do things, they're more than welcome to prove us wrong on things like Btrfs as being the best operating system, or being the best file system. But it's also, this kind of stuff has happened time and again in Red Hat's past. I still love the KVM versus Zen example. We were all in on Zen. And it was in the Fedora community and from the engineers that kind of said, hey, you higher up muckety mucks, you're wrong. And this is why. and two great things happened. One is that they didn't have to tell us we were wrong. They could show us because this stuff was up and running in Fedora and was ready to go. And two, when we decided, yeah, we're wrong. We backed the wrong horse here. This was the wrong technology. It was already ready for us to go. So we could just pull it in from Fedora. That's such a powerful relationship. I'm sure Matthew in particular has tons of examples like that where he's got such an impossible job of working for the so-called corporate overlords. I guess that's me. But then also making sure that Fedora is thriving and useful in its own right, because that is where the community gets to drag us along when we're not ready for it. And most of the time they're right.
I will definitely bring up that exact example with Matthew and compare the two explanations. So as we kind of close out our time here, and if you're watching us live, feel free to throw some questions in the comment or in the chat. If you're catching this after the fact, throw some questions in the comments. We try and I try and check the comments about once a day, usually every other day. But we definitely listen and would love to pass on your questions to Mike. But one final question that came to my mind as we were talking is, what would you tell either yourself or a young sysadmin, someone who's just getting started with infrastructure and operations, knowing what you know now? What, if you had the chance, what would you tell that your younger self?
Oh, so much.
Hopefully not who won the World Series.
You know what's funny about operators is that is not something, still to this day, as far as I know, that is not something they teach in college. There's just kind of this assumption that if you're a developer, you know how to operate something. And to me, that's the difference between, yeah, sure, I can go figure out how to ride a bike on my own, but now I'm behind, a big Caterpillar tractor. Like those are very different scenarios. They're still vehicles. And so I would say the biggest thing is that to get really good at this, you're going to have to go and learn a lot of these things on your own. there are ways to be taught, and certainly, Red Hat. I was in RHCE for a while. I came one endorsement away from my RHCA, and I just never went. And it was the satellite endorsement. I could have just gone out and gotten it, and I never did. But like there's some good training available. But to really get to that next level, like you're going to have to really hone your skills on your own and experiment. And Linux is consistently the best and easiest way to do that. That is, I think, what I would tell my younger self and any admin that wants to go play with this stuff. And then also I would say, there's so many different topics to cover there, but I would, learn about things like load testing and security. Just all the things that you hear about and that you think about, like, just go do those things. It's the best way to get experience on it.
Yeah, I can relate to that. Just I preach often on the show about having a home lab, playing with the technology, and one of the best decisions I ever made was I bought what amounted to just a desktop and installed CentOS Linux on it. At the time, it was probably like 5, maybe 6. And just started playing with things like Minecraft and Nextcloud. And I started running my own services at home. And to this day, I still have a server in the basement that's running Minecraft. No Nextcloud, but it's running now a lot of those workloads in Podman Pod in containers. And anytime that I need to write some article, anytime I need to give a presentation, I'm in my home lab building it for myself, trying it out. There's so much power in that, because I got a network communications degree in college, and I had operating system courses, but none of that taught me how to be a sysadmin. No, none of that taught me how to be an operator. I had to figure it out for myself.
Yeah, and I was just going to add, I totally agree with you guys. Hands-on is the way to go. There's no substitute for actually practicing this stuff, and that's the best way to learn it. And along with that, I want to make sure everyone knows we do have the RHEL for Developer subscription, where you can go out and get a free subscription for, I think it's 16 instances of RHEL, where you can go out, and it's a great way to learn and get some more hands-on experience with it.
Yep. And I guess the last thing I would tell my younger self is it's probably DNS. If there's a sudden performance issue, make sure you've got Keep Alive enabled. If SSL is not working at random times, make sure you've got entropy on the system. And I think those are all very key things.
That's some good advice right there.
But it's never DNS.
Always DNS. Always DNS.
Oh, goodness. Well, Mike, thank you very, very much. I know the week before Summit is crazy busy for all of us, and wrapping up a release cycle, very, very crazy busy. So thank you very, very much for coming on and being a guest. We waited far too long to approach you to be on the show, but would love to have you back anytime you have something to say.
Yeah, absolutely. I had a good time.
Yeah, thanks so much, Mike.
Be sure to tune in on Friday, where we've got Into the Terminal, where Scott and Nate will be talking about... actually forgot what our topic was. Give me a second. Installing new applications and runtimes. So in light of the new release, we're going to be talking a little bit about what modularity, what application streams, what all these different terms that you hear about look like in practice, how that works in RHEL, and how RHEL is not your grandfather's Linux. We get to do cool things too. So that'll be this Friday at noon Eastern. Of course, join us next week. A lot of us will be out at Red Hat Summit, so if you're in Boston next week, feel free to drop on by. I know Brian has a presentation and some booth time. I know I've got booth time, presentations. I'm going to try and attend as many of the after-hours events as I can. But what I wanted to point out was that if you subscribe to this channel, there's a big subscribe button and then a bell right next to it. Click those, because next week we're actually doing a number of live streams live from the Expo Hall. We learned some lessons from Ansible Fest. We're going to apply those, and we're going to try and do a morning kickoff and an afternoon wrap-up of what was announced at Summit. We've got an interview with the Red Hat Accelerator, sort of our champion program, as well as try and grab people like Mike and Brian and Gunnar, just different folks off the floor, and just ask how Summit's going, what things have stood out. So we're going to try and do as many of those as we can. I think there's like 5 on the schedule right now, but if you subscribe and hit the notification bell, you'll be notified anytime we go live. And shameless plug, I'll actually be there with Matthew Miller as well next Wednesday afternoon. We're doing an episode of the Fedora Podcast live from Summit, so check out the Fedora Podcast YouTube channel. I know that was shameless, but so much going on, so much to talk about. In fact, so much so that Brian, I forgot what our next RHEL Presents episode is about. Maybe the OnLogic episode we had to reschedule. I think it's OnLogic.
I believe it is the OnLogic. Yep.
So Mike mentioned Edge and our partner ecosystem, so that'll be a great chance to check out what does that really look like in action. We'll have Ben Briard on, and we'll have some folks from OnLogic to talk about RHEL for the Edge and talk about some of the hardware offerings that OnLogic has. So tons of stuff going on. Follow us on Twitter to get all the crazy juicy details. Post your pictures of you working with Red Hat Enterprise Linux. We'll share those out as well. But thank you all so much for joining. On behalf of our guest, Mike McGrath, my co-host, Brian Smith, I'm Eric the IT Guy Hendricks, and for the entire Red Hat Enterprise Linux team and the Red Hat family, thank you all so much for joining us. And we will see you this Friday and next week at Summit. Take care, y'all.